Wake up, everybody. Welcome into your Thursday. This is Redacted. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And on this show, we cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores. The mainstream media is coalescing around all of the warmongers and neocons in Washington, D.C. right now, and liberals that, hey, Trump, what he said about Zelensky, that has to be false. He's one of our greatest allies in the world. We need to keep funneling billions of dollars into this war, this meat grinder, so that millions more people can die, and we can continue to funnel all this money so that Ukrainians can live lavish lifestyles in Morocco or whatever. I don't know. But we're going to talk about all of that because they are melting down at this hour. And we're going to give you sort of like a history lesson of why what Trump said is actually accurate.
And it's maybe a cold comfort that everyone who is screaming these lies the loudest lost a presidency bid.
Right,
so
right,
that's what they have in common.
And Congress, exactly.
Right. So that can be some kind of cold comfort. Also, we're going to talk about the war in Gaza because Israel is saying Hamas is parading dead bodies. Is that actually the case? Well, one of our favorite Palestinian journalists, Ramzi Baroud, is here to break down a lot of the propaganda that we continue to see. Plus, what will happen now that this Arab summit is about to convene? Are they actually going to rebuild Gaza? Is that possible? What options are there for Israel? Is this the end of Netanyahu? All of those questions. We have a lot of questions.
Also, Canada. We're going to talk about that because guess what? Tonight's a huge Canada-USA game, right, for the championship. But before that, liberals have a new plan. And it appears that they're coalescing around the idea in Canada that maybe, you know what, maybe we shouldn't even have elections. Maybe we should just cancel elections so that way liberals can hold on to power into 2026 in Canada. That's a brilliant strategy, maybe taken right out of Zelensky's playbook in Ukraine. So we're going to talk about all of that. We've got a lot of great guests for you lined up on the show today. But first.
Well, we want to remind you that even though we broadcast on various channels, we have YouTube, we have X. Also, we are on Rumble. And if you'd like to upgrade your Rumble to a premium, you can do it right now. And when you do, you're supporting a defender of free speech. You may have heard that Rumble is in litigation in Brazil in order to charge that government with illegal censorship. We know that Rumble had a censorship demands in France and they did not back down and were blocked in France. So if you believe in free speech like we do, then it's a great time to support Rumble. Head on over to rumble.com/premium. Use the code redacted and you'll save $10 off. And again, you'll know, oh, look, that's us on the Rumble channel. You can get your Rumble premium for $10 off. Plus, you know that you are sticking it to the man. Rumble allows us to say anything we want. Like
yes.
Poop. Look what I just did. I can say that because I'm free to say that. So yes, support Rumble, please, because they're one of our best advocates for all free speech.
And just to make a point on that. So a few years ago, we were one of the few shows, I think maybe the only or one of the only shows, really, us and the Duran. There were a few others who were actually calling attention to the atrocities in eastern Ukraine and actually trying to tell the truth about the Ukraine war on YouTube specifically. And then we were blocked and banned when we told you the truth. And in fact, YouTube labeled it as misinformation at the time. And then they had to walk that back because it wasn't misinformation at all. And then it was later confirmed by multiple press outlets that, no, we were telling the truth about what was actually happening there. And you were being fed a lot of propaganda about what was happening in Ukraine. But Rumble stood by us from the whole time. There was never a problem. You can tell the truth on Rumble. So big advocates of our friends over at Rumble. Anyway, yes. Okay. Well, I'm getting really pissed off because over the past few days, we've seen a flood of misinformation about the Ukraine war, particularly from neocons, liberals, warmongers in Washington, D.C., who are twisting President Trump's recent comments about Ukraine, starting the war. Remember he said this the other night? Zelensky being a dictator. He said that yesterday, and he doubled down on it again today, which he is. So those two things have really made warmongers and neocons and liberals upset. These neocons, liberals, and morons desperately want the war to continue, and they desperately want you to believe Ukrainian dictator Zelensky is a hero after President Trump called him out as a dictator who cancels elections and persecutes Christians in his country. It all came to a boiling point, though, on Wednesday when President Trump said Ukraine was responsible for the start of the war. He's 100% correct, except he left out the part where the CIA played a critical role in starting the war, using Ukraine as a proxy. But nevertheless, that hasn't stopped the backlash. The backlash has been swift. Neocons like Nikki Haley posting this. These are classic Russian talking points, Nikki Haley says. Exactly what Putin wants. Of course, she absolutely wants to continue this war. She was pushing vehemently for it. Thankfully, President Trump listened to Tucker Carlson, who vehemently told him, do not make her a part of your administration. She's a warmonger. Backstabber in chief Mike Pence posted this. Mr. President, Ukraine did not start this war. Russia launched an unprovoked, brutal invasion, claiming hundreds of thousands of lives. The road to peace must be built on the truth. Russia invades Ukraine and largest year. Anyway, so he's saying Ukraine did not start this war. And hundreds of prominent neocons, liberals, warmongers losing their minds, saying Trump is using Putin's talking points or calling him a Putin puppet like this today in the Daily Star. Look at that. Putin's poodle. Orange man baby blames here, right? Ukraine for what?
You know what they're doing here. They're thinking that if they embarrass President Trump enough, he will walk back this. I mean, it's a stupid method. It never worked, not during the first administration. But this seems one level past. Don't you think?
Oh, yeah. Janine Shaner in our chat says it wasn't unprovoked. Exactly, because you watch our show. You're intelligent. But there are a lot of morons out there today, and you can see them all over X. Then they want you to believe a distorted version of history, but the truth is far from different. So let's break it down. To understand the origins of this war, we need to go back to 2014. And if you want, we could even go back earlier to the expansion of NATO, Bill Clinton, 1994. But let's stick with 2014 here, okay? The year a CIA-backed coup overthrew Ukraine's democratically elected government. The Maidan protests in Kiev, which started as political unrest with paid and trained CIA terrorists and thugs, quickly escalated into violence on purpose. The CIA is very good at that, by the way, infiltrating groups, carrying out color revolutions. And on this pivotal day in Maidan Square, dozens of people killed in the square. But what was really happening behind the scenes, the Western-backed intelligence community was actively fomenting this coup using CIA-paid agitators for months.
Which we knew and were confirmed by the Victoria Nuland call that was leaked to the press, in which she actively talked about planning this. Victoria Nuland of the U.S. State Department.
Yes. So these protests were used as a pretext to install a pro-Western puppet government. Once in power, this new regime turned its sights on eastern Ukraine. It's no longer eastern Ukraine. It's now a part of Russia. But at the time, it was eastern Ukraine and Crimea, where a significant Russian-speaking population lived. Ukrainian forces launched attacks on these regions, leading to the deaths of tens of thousands of people. Innocent civilians, innocent children. That's what we call a genocide. In Crimea, Russian troops were already stationed there. They were able to thwart the attack, and the Ukrainian troops that were stationed there defected to the Russian military. 80% of them did that. 80% were like, we don't want to be a part of those guys, not these guys that are trying to kill us. They had a referendum vote, by the way. And in fact, the official who held that vote was Ukrainian. And they voted to join Russia of their own free will. It was not what Barack Obama told us, an invasion of Crimea. They were already there. This was a lie, a bald-faced lie. But of course, the media runs with it, and then that propaganda gets, it proliferates, right? So Eastern Ukraine was not so lucky. In fact, they were jealous of Crimea and wondered why Russia hadn't taken control of them as well. What about us here in Donetsk and Donbass? Time magazine was willing to cover it at the time. Look at this. Many Ukrainians want Russia to invade.
The
Time
date
magazine.
Stamp, 2014.
Yes, look at the date on the byline there.
Hello, Rob. Can I get a quick audio test from you, please?
Check, check. 1, 2. Yeah. 1, 2.
Gotcha. Thank you, sir.
Me? Thank you. You're welcome. This is Clayton. So many Ukrainians want Russia to invade. That's what the Time magazine cover said. Many Ukrainians want Russia to invade, but Russia didn't invade. A Venezuela journalist covering this genocide long before the Ukraine war broke out explained it this way. Take a look. Venezuelan journalist in Donbass. Kiev tries to kill as many people as possible. This was before the Ukrainian war broke out that we know in the media as like the Zelensky, the Ukrainian war. This was well before that. These headlines. Venezuelan journalists who were there covering it Ukraine tries to kill as many people as possible in their indiscriminate attacks in the Donbass. So they were doing this openly, killing children on the playground, dropping petal mines, these little petal mines that look like leaves. Great journalist Eva Bartlett has covered this extensively, where these little kids will go up because they look like leaves. And like, what is this? Oh, and they pick them up and their hands blow off. Face blows off. Killed. This was not a civil dispute. It was a targeted military campaign against ethnic Russians who resisted the new CIA-backed leadership. Even CNN, buried in its archives, reported on these attacks. But the mainstream narrative conveniently ignores this. So CNN had a whole report about this, and it's remarkable to watch. It's a little bit long, but they covered the destruction of the CIA and the Western-backed governments in Donbass. So I'm going to include that here. I want to show it and release it a little bit later. So let's insert that video here. And for our live audience, unfortunately, we don't have it at the moment, but yes. So let's play that here so you can see exactly what CNN covered way back then about these atrocities before the war started. Watch. So meanwhile, behind the scenes, the CIA was expanding its influence, setting up multiple field offices throughout Ukraine. Even the New York Times did a deep dive in 2024 on these CIA bases throughout Ukraine. Here's the front page story in the New York Times. These intelligence hubs were coordinated ongoing operations, ensuring that the conflict remained active while relentless attacks on civilians in the Donbass region were unfolding. The goal? To provoke Russia into action while securing Ukraine as a proxy for Western interests. Would it work? Would Putin take the bait? Well, this is where the Minsk Accords come in, of course. Agreements meant to bring peace to the region, but as former German Chancellor Angela Merkel later admitted, the West never actually intended to honor them at all. It was a joke. It was like propaganda. So Putin fell for it. And he admitted he fell for it. He thought that they actually meant to go along with that. These agreements were nothing more than a stalling tactic, a deception used to buy time while Ukraine was armed and fortified for an eventual confrontation with Russia. President Putin repeatedly urged adherence to the Minsk Accords to prevent further bloodshed. Hey, stop killing these people in eastern Ukraine. Stop killing children. Stop just bombing markets, schools, playgrounds. Wouldn't that be a good idea? But his warnings were ignored. The genocide continued, and then 2019 hit. Zelensky was a peace candidate. He vowed to end the genocide war in eastern Ukraine. He vowed to stop the killing of his own people. Sure, they spoke Russian, but they were Ukrainian. They lived there for decades. However, very quickly after the election, Zelensky did not make good on his promise to end the war in Donbass. This was the single biggest reason he was elected in the spring of 2019. Did you know that?
Yes.
Did you, all of you watching, did you know that? He was a peace candidate. He ran on ending their genocide in eastern Ukraine. But why did he back down? Why did he back down on this? Because there are a lot of nationalist neo-Nazis in Ukraine. The largest number, in fact, of Nazis in the world live in Ukraine. Even NBC News, before the modern war broke out, openly put this in their headlines. Ukraine's Nazi problem is real.
And the Israeli government warned the U.S. State Department, we think you should help take a look at this Nazi problem in Ukraine.
So Israel was warning about the Nazi problem in Ukraine. So was the Daily Mail. So were many publications about the Nazi problem in Ukraine. Now we forget about it. We ignore it. And in fact, in Canada, they invite neo-Nazis to stand up and get applause lines in front of the Canadian Parliament, which they did under Trudeau. Anyway, Ukraine's neo-Nazi problem is real. And here in that photo, you can see the proud neo-Nazi Azov battalion that are still hugely influential, running the military in Ukraine. So Zelensky said he was going to stop the killing of ethnic Russians in eastern Ukraine. He went to the front lines where these Nazis were carrying out this genocide, and they quickly tried to overthrow him. He quickly backed down. He tried to stare the Nazis down, basically. But he's a small man, and he was trying to tell them to stop fighting. And they told him to shut the F up, and it was all caught on camera. Watch.
о том, что демилитаризация, украинская экономика, мы бы хотели это все обсудить и формализировать, чтобы потом не было как у Петра Алексеевича.
Денис, ты со мной хочешь формализировать отношения?
В меморандуме.
Я с тобой?
Не я с вами, а все люди, которые в этом процессе, те, которым болит за Украину.
Как капитуляция, прошу ты.
Формализация.
Я пришел, тебе сказал, вы оружие вывезете, а ты меня переводишь стрелки.
Так я вам второй момент уже озвучил. Я вас услышал, вы
Смотри,
сказали.
ты мне вообще не можешь никакие ультиматумы озвучивать, Денис, ты не понял.
Так я вам ультиматум, я говорю, это были люди.
Нам за эти
говорили.
оружие забрать?
При чем здесь? Я вам
не
говорю
понимаю,
за
чем мы
второй
закончим
момент.
сейчас разговор.
Так мы нормально общаемся.
Ну так и давай
общаемся.
нормально общаться.
Ну, никто же вас не пытается макнуть никуда.
Что?
Вам передали то, что происходило в Украине, то, что люди
Кто
еще
мне
по
передал?
Украине.
Я же тебе говорю, ты мне скажи,
Так
кто?
я вам говорю, по Украине были акции.
Денис, по Украине вчера прошел дождь, вот что я слышу.
Ну, так, я вам рассказываю о том, что
где
происходило.
акции? Кто мне что передал? Говорю, давай, что ты?
Вот я вам и говорю, что люди хотят встречи с вами,
Какие люди? Денис,
которые вышли на мероприятие под...
Фамилию ты можешь мне сказать или нет? Ты что ты все
Ну,
время...
хотите,
весь день-
Плеханов, Кухарчук, ну, это по разным областям.
Ну,
Дроздов
Денис,
и
это же так не
дальше.
делается.
Ну, так не, ну, так
Не,
спросили,
еще,
я
подожди,
передал.
вышел стадник.
Yeah, they're all friends there, right?
Yeah.
Having conversation with Nazis. You need to stop the killing of the ethnic Russians in eastern Ukraine. And the Nazis are like, no, sorry, we're going to keep doing that. We like doing that. So he backed down. Zelensky declared support for stopping that war in 2019. But large-scale neo-Nazi street protests led by nationalist thugs threatening to overthrow him, he quickly backed down, never returning to the issue again. And he allowed his military to continue the genocide in violation of the Minsk Accords with Russia. And now, years later, the same people who helped create this war are acting outraged at Trump for stating the obvious, that Ukraine started this conflict. The facts back him up. The war didn't begin in 2022. It began in 2014 at the latest, when the U.S. and its allies helped overthrow Ukrainian's government and turn the country into a battleground for their own geopolitical goals, provoking Putin into invading eastern Ukraine and protecting the people who were under a 10-year genocide. It's time to cut through the propaganda and tell the truth about what actually happened in Ukraine.
Well, I also take issue with this provoking Putin into invading eastern Ukraine. There is nuance there as well, because Russian parliament voted for a special military operation at the request of those regions in eastern Ukraine.
And actually,
So
Putin didn't want to do it.
Yes, it was not his personal pet that, ooh, I'm going to take over the world. We have a guest helping to break this down. Why are so many neocons empowered to change this narrative and pretend like the world began in 2022? Joining us to talk about it is Colonel Rob Maness. He's a 32-year-old, he's not 32 years old. He may be. You look very young, sir.
I am.
He's a 32-year combat veteran and host of the Rob Maness Show. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
You don't
Thanks
look
for
a day.
dating me.
Happy 32nd birthday. Yeah.
Welcome in, Colonel. Welcome in, Colonel. So Colonel,
thanks for having me.
Over the past 24 hours, we've seen if you want to try to spot a neocon, it's very easy over the past 24 hours. They've shown their stripes, they've shown their spots. It's very, very easy to see them. You see people like Nikki Haley jumping out, Lindsey Graham saying we need to fund and arm Ukraine as much as we can right now. We love you, Mr. President. However, we need to let Ukraine win with as much money and weapons as we can. Yeah. And then you have people like Senator Hawley of Missouri saying absolutely not. I will not support any more funding of this corrupt government in Ukraine. So this is pretty amazing. What do you think is going to happen with the war funding now in Ukraine as it dries up?
Well, let me just add one piece to that, too. Senator Tom Cotton is trying to stop Elbridge Colby, who's for USD Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, the number 3 guy in the Pentagon, who is a staunch America First policy guy, wrote the strategy in the first Trump administration and is adamantly opposed to more dollars going to Ukraine. So Tom Cotton's in on it, too. And it's very easy to spot them these days. Unfortunately, though, it goes well back before even 2014, Clayton. Look, you can go back to 2008 when the United States government operations run by people like Victoria Nuland, I'm sure you're aware of her name, came in and conducted really what I think is the first color revolution and started messing around in Ukraine at the beginning of the the first Obama administration.
Great point.
And then as things heated up, and they got into this civil war, which was going on long before Crimea happened in 2014 for a couple of years. We were calling this out because you've heard the term the Azov Battalion. That's the Nazi battalions. We were those of us that are opposed to the endless war policy. I was running for U.S. Senate in 2014 over in Louisiana in my first political race, and ending the endless war policy was one of my top 3 planks, and it was wildly popular. So we were calling this out that the American government, led by Victoria Nuland and backed up by money from USAID, that's another term that everybody's heard about recently. And the CIA was mucking around in Ukraine and changing the leadership of the government out. They did it twice. And then all of a sudden in 2022, Putin invades and it's all his fault. Come on, man. The reality is the United States provoked this. We had 12 CIA installations on the border with Russia in Ukraine. That's not a provocation? Oh, my goodness. We used USAID to propagandize the population of the Ukraine to get them to come out and protest and support the Nazis that were the essence of those protests coming up against Zelensky there, which is why he flipped from a peace candidate to a war candidate, and he refuses to back off of it. Obviously, he's insulted the president of the United States yesterday, and the president of the United States is doing what Donald Trump does. He's crushing him, and he's going to continue to do that while he's in peace talks with the Russians and Vladimir Putin directly to try to end this killing.
Now, one of the things I have been enjoying is that Trump has given a lot of us license to say what we've been saying all along is that Zelensky is not a good dude. He's actually he's a narcissist, and a dictator. He does not care that his people are dying. I can say a lot of bad things about Zelensky, and now it's okay to do that. One of the things I've been wondering, though, is Zelensky's the reason for one of Trump's impeachment, and Trump, supposedly held up military aid to Ukraine. Well, that aid quite obviously was going to continue the civil war on Ukraine's own people. So Trump must have known this during his first term. Why did he wait so long to say this, do you think?
Well, I think it's because, he was trying to figure out, how do I get in and actually resolve this? And it's a complicated situation. But the reason why Zelensky is acting the way he is because of the Nazis. You were right in your intro to this, that those Nazis are very powerful. In that area of Ukraine, the southwest portion of it, that's where the German Nazis were operating and committing Holocaust all the way back in the World War II days. And those people have the same ideology. They're the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of those very same Nazis. They're working the same process. And I believe Zelensky is under threat, for one, but I also believe that he has swallowed the propaganda of the West and NATO and the United States and really believes that he can win this war and take all of his territory back. And the combination of those two things, the threat that he's under, plus this propagandizement that the United States really is primarily responsible for, has changed his views to where he does something stupid. He goes back publicly at the one guy that's in the presidency that you don't go back at because he's going to crush you. He's going to crush you. And he's got a track record of winning on that kind of platform almost 100% of the time. Well, 100% of the time, really. I mean, come on.
Colonel, I know you got to go in a minute. Just final question here, which is, I'm just stunned by this. I'm really stunned that Trump has come out and said this. He's called out who started this war. He's called out the corruption, the money laundering operation, and the fact that he's a dictator. Trump doesn't seem like he's ever one to walk statements back. And do you think he's going to walk any of this back under pressure from all these neocons?
No, you won't see him walk this one back because he's right. We know he's right. We've been talking about it. I mean, you guys have been talking about it. I've been talking about it. Everybody that I work with on the national security side, I've had Elbridge Colby on my show 3 times, I think, or 2 himself. I've had Colonel John Mills, U.S. Army retired, who is an expert in the information operations world and was also a senior DOD leader. And we all agree that this war was started at the genesis of it. The United States came in with color revolutions, flipped the government, turned it against Russia, started talking about NATO membership, and got Zelensky to talk about NATO membership. And then we expanded into Finland and Sweden, and the Russians said, that's enough. It's our vital national interest. And unfortunately, Barack Obama was right. The Ukraine eastern border is not the vital national interest of the United States. And the president of the United States now is going to act on that and protect our interest and get us out of this and stop this war.
Colonel Maness,
so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, man. This is great. Love your commentary on this. Thank you for being a voice of truth in this sea of like misinformation and neocon madness that's happened over the past 48 hours. I hope people share this interview all over the place for all those people getting on Twitter saying that Zelensky's not a dictator. I hope people pay attention to that. Colonel, great to see you. Thank you so much for jumping in.
Thank you, Clayton. I appreciate y'all.
You know, I feel like you, like, oh my God, he's saying the truth. We've been saying this for 3 years now. Please don't walk that back, because we've been shouting this from the top of our lungs, trying to remind people of this important context. We've been called Putin lovers and Russophiles and all kinds of bad names. I took it a lot yesterday on X. I'm going to say I took a lot of like, you just love Putin, you're a failed journalist, a lot of nasty stuff.
I always like
Go ahead.
I always like to point out that the one of the, like, I think it was like our first 2-week ban on YouTube was literally for calling Azov neo-Nazis, and the reason they gave for it was hate speech. There was hate speech.
Right. Yeah. And I was literally talking with YouTube representatives saying, I just want to be clear.
You're representing the interest of Nazis? Yeah,
you're defending Nazis. I just want to be clear who you're defending here when we actually call out who they wear patches. It's not like a mystery about this. The press has been covering this for decades about Ukraine's Nazi problem. But okay, you're defending them now? Right. Then they reverse their position on that. So it's good to know.
The point that you were making is that Donald Trump is telling the truth. It has given license to those of us who have been reporting this factually to say, I told you so. And I feel scared that some kind of government narrative can come and shut that down. Some kind of propaganda machine can take that from us. I mean, it's not like a toy, right? But I do feel a little bit like someone's going to take my toy.
Ann Messina says, is Redacted on the Ukraine hit list? Oh, yeah. We got placed on the whatever it was, the Ukrainian kill list, I guess. The same day that happened, our friend Tucker was put on there, and Tucker texted me and he said, hey, it's good to be in good company with you guys. Mm-hmm.
I think Jimmy Dore was on it as well. Yeah. I mean, that's something that our own U.S. State Department should look into, because we're American citizens. You'd think that they would want to defend us. That's our own journalists are on your state hit list. We should have a problem with that. Our own State Department should have a problem with that. Marco Rubio, would you like to be friends?
I haven't heard anyone talking about that in the past 3 weeks since Trump's been in. That should be, hey, Elon, if you're watching the show or anyone wants to tweet at Elon about that, seriously, that should be something they look into, is why are we funneling these monies into the Ukrainian government, and they've literally have American journalists on kill lists. Right. Like, can we check that out, please? Be interesting to see.
Maybe you're interested.
All right. Hey, we got more news to get to here in a second, but I want to talk about this. So our friends at Black Forest Supplements, take a look at this. I just want to play this for you here and just get a sense of what Joe Rogan had on with Andrew Huberman, Dr. Huberman, about GLP, their 1-5-in-1 support. And I just started taking this actually last week, in addition to the other Black Forest supplements that I've been taking. And he talks about the benefits of this. Watch.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a GLP-1 glucagon-like peptide. The story of that is, since you like animals and the natural world, a guy down in South America was looking at Gila monsters, those really scary things, and he realized they don't have to eat very often. I wonder if they're hungry all the time or not. Turns out it takes their blood, isolates a peptide, which turns out to be GLP-1, puts it into other animals, and realizes it suppresses appetite. Amazing.
It's amazing. So you can actually do that with Black Forest Supplements GLP-1. You could try to do it the same way like the lizards are doing it, or you could just take this supplement. You don't have to go like through nature and try to find it yourself and try to inject yourself with it. You can actually get their 5-in-1 support supplement from Black Forest. They're a longtime sponsor of this show, and their scientists have developed this 5-in-1 natural GLP-1 booster. Unlike Ozempic, this GLP-1 booster supports weight loss without affecting your bone density or causing muscle loss. Or what else did they find with Ozempic recently? I mean,
let's see, that it causes blindness.
Yeah.
That it causes permanent diarrhea.
Yeah.
Perpetual diarrhea for the rest of your life.
So wouldn't you like to try something natural? Anyway, they have
I would
natural
like to not have perpetually diarrhea.
Natural ingredients like green tea extract, cayenne pepper, which stimulate GLP-1 in your gut and bloodstream. So try them out for the next 48 hours right now. Buy 2, get 1 free. Just go to blackforestsupplements.com/redacted. You can scan the QR code right there on your screen. Try it out for the next 48 hours. Buy 2, get 1 free. blackforestsupplements.com/redacted.
Well, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass says she was not aware of the fire risk that eventually brought devastation to Los Angeles before she left for her trip for Ghana. You may recall that before the devastation of the Southern California fires, while that was raging throughout the California hills, their mayor Karen Bass was on a diplomatic trip to Ghana. She says that President Biden asked her to go. She was super excited to go, even though when she campaigned for mayor, she said, I will take no foreign trips. My business is in Los Angeles. Well, I guess she didn't really believe that when she was offered a trip to Ghana. Now her excuse is that these warnings were not communicated to her. Well, that excuse does not fly because the National Weather Service issued this on January 2nd. So does she not know how to read the internet? Again, this was January 2nd. She took off January 4th, and the fires did ensue on January 7th. Now here she's saying, I just didn't know about it. It wasn't properly told to me, and then we didn't do the proper precautions. This was her on the local news watch.
To go to Ghana, which I know you've said was a mistake now. But I just am curious on the thought process behind it.
Right.
Because we know that there was warnings about the weather before you went, and you still went. What was the thought process behind going to Ghana?
So let me just tell you a couple of things. First of all, when the White House called and asked me if I would represent the president, I said yes. It was going to be a very, very short trip, over a weekend and 2 business days. We need to look at everything about the preparation and all of that for the fires, because I think when we evaluate that, we will find that although there were warnings that I frankly wasn't aware of, although there were warnings, I think our preparation wasn't what it typically is.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait, hold on a second. So she wants to investigate why she went to Ghana? That's basically what she's saying.
No,
I want to figure out, what led to the fact that I went on a trip. Like, I went to Ghana and my administration approved it and we planned it. And the planning that went into me going to Ghana and not being here, we need to investigate why I went to Ghana.
Well, look. Anybody can have a vacation. She could have said, I'm going to take a vacation to Ghana on my own time and put a deputy mayor in. That might have been valid, but she did not do that. She was acting in official capacity. And what she's saying is we need to investigate why I was not alerted properly. And again, I go back to the fact that we were all alerted by the National Weather Service 2 days before you hopped on that plane. Can we put that back on the screen, what the National Weather Service said? Look at the date stamp, January 2nd. It says, use extra caution, extreme fire growth and behavior possible. It says ready, set, go. They don't mean ready, set, go out of town. They mean be ready all the time. So if you know this, you might want to say, what can we do to prevent catastrophe? Can we send up helicopters to watch for any spark and put it out quicker? Can we protect our people better? No, she took that as ready, set, go out of town. I suppose. She does later in this clip say, I just felt so bad. I really felt bad. I just want everybody to know that I really felt bad. So I don't know if you forgive her for that. You can forgive her. Sure, be a forgiving person if you want, but I do not accept this excuse. And I don't think any Californians should.
So now she feels badly about it because when she was standing there in the tarmac or waiting in the airport and a British reporter was asking her specifically, like, do you feel bad about this? She just stared like a koala bear, like staring into space.
She didn't know what to say.
She didn't know what to. She didn't say a damn thing.
Well, no, but at least she feels bad. She wasn't properly alerted. Now, in a clip I chose not to bring, there was another one where she was saying, you know, Angelenos can go to this website, and she sort of fubbed the URL, which tells me maybe she doesn't know how to use the internet. So maybe she missed this. So what do you think she needs? Does she need cue cards, like someone to walk around to tell her what the news are? Like, what do we got to do, girl, so that you know the news that the rest of us know?
We need a ring girl, you know, like in between the fights. We need like a ring girl to walk around.
Right. What Johnny Carson used to have, like someone who holds up the cards.
A cue
like
card
that.
person?
So, yeah, something like that.
I was thinking a ring girl.
Of course you are.
I much prefer that.
Well, anyhow, you let me know if you accept this as an excuse. She didn't know. The rest of us could have known and did know because I wasn't following this either, but I'm not the mayor of Los Angeles. And we see there was a warning somebody should have heeded. Turns out nobody did. Not a single dang person, Clayton.
Not surprising at all. A lot of people in the chat saying, yeah, LA is really far from Ghana. Why was the mayor sent to Ghana in the first place? You know?
She says the White House asked her, the Biden White House asked her to go to this. If it was so important to the Biden administration to be at the inauguration of a new president in Ghana, do they need a local? Is there nobody else? There was nobody else diplomatic. We know that the Biden administration in the first few days of January was doing nothing but funneling tax dollars into NGOs in order to hide them from the American people. We know that now, right? Did they have to do this? Was
the mayor of Cleveland wasn't available that weekend? What's with the random mayors? Like, that's not the State Department. Those are mayors.
Yeah.
They have a job to do at home.
That's not how this works.
You would be my ring girl.
That's nice of you to say.
Just gotta dig myself out of that one.
That's not what I'm going to be doing. Walking around with cards.
Actually, when you
that might actually get me to do chores.
If like you're like, hey, everyone come to dinner. Or if like the kids are at school or something like that, like, hey, I made a meal for you and I don't come.
I'll just walk around in a bikini and high heels with it.
It's dinner time.
I'm gonna do that with your chores, like that piece of the wall that you need to.
I need to patch some drywall.
You need to patch some drywall. I'm just gonna walk into your office this weekend with
drywall.
Patch the drywall.
Patch the drywall. I'll be like the road runner. Beep beep. I will be there.
All right. Coming up, we're going to talk about the war in Gaza. An Arab summit is about to begin over the weekend. Will Arab countries now step in to rebuild Gaza? Is this a ploy for President Trump to get someone else to do it? The Arab nations that otherwise have not stepped in to help Gaza? What will happen in Israel now that Netanyahu has continued to say, well, you may give us back our hostages, but where are those negotiations? We're going to talk to Palestinian-American journalist Ramzi Baroud coming up in just a second. But first,
gold just hit a new all-time high. So take a look at this on your screen here. This is gold just hitting another, Bank of America says gold's going to hit over $3,000 an ounce in who knows, by the end of this year, perhaps, but it's creeping there very, very closely now to $3,000 an ounce. You think how it was like last year. I mean, we're jumping up almost $1,000 in value for gold in just a short amount of time. Unbelievable. So our friends at Lear Capital can help you get set up investing in gold and silver. We are big proponents of that. And like I always say, it's great that it jumps up in value. It's great that it's jumped up over $1,000 in value in the past year and a half. That's wonderful. Especially as a gold investor myself and silver investor. That's wonderful. But for me, gold is a store of value. Every government currency in world history has collapsed. All of them. And given what's going on with the volatility of the US dollar, what's happening with the euro, the world stage right now with the BRICS countries and everything else, I definitely want to have my family's future tied to something that has sustained for 5,000 years. Through wars, through government collapses, through fiat currency collapses, gold and silver have retained their store of value. And so they can help you, even if you want to convert, maybe you got $1,000 in your US dollar savings account, you want to convert it over, they'll help you do that. Maybe you have an old 401k or an old IRA, they can actually convert it over for you and into a self-directed IRA that you control, not Wall Street. So give them a call today, 1-800-613-3557 to get your free guide. Just go to 1-800, there it is, 1-800-613-3557 for your free guide, or simply go to LearRedacted.com. LearRedacted.com is the place to go.
Hamas is offering to release all remaining Israeli hostages in exchange for a permanent ceasefire with Israel. This should effectively end the war in Gaza, but what they're asking for is a full withdrawal of Israeli troops as well. So will Israel do that? And will this fly? Well, Palestinian journalist Ramzi Baroud is joining us to discuss. There's a lot to discuss. So Ramzi, what do you think is going to happen here now that Hamas is offering the remainder of the hostages? And I think it's always important to bring up that Israel will still have many Palestinian hostages. So what becomes of them?
Yeah, absolutely. Thousands of them. Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity. Let's remember that the all for all, exchange is something that the Palestinians themselves have offered from the very beginning. So when President Trump came later on and he began speaking about, all the hostages will have to be released, this needs to be done by this date, this actually was a Palestinian offer from the very start. Netanyahu refused this. The Israeli government refused this because by doing so, it would have deprived them from having so many tools, which is manipulating the aid, the medicine, the water, the electricity, and they were hoping to use all of these elements to exact political concessions from the Palestinians, as they have failed to exact political concessions as a result of 15 months of genocide. Now, but what ended up happening is that this became a PR disaster for Netanyahu. Every Saturday, you have Palestinians doing this massive military parade, showing how strong the resistance is in every part of Gaza, that Hamas is in charge of Gaza, and releasing the Israeli hostages in front of live media coverage all over the world. Netanyahu doesn't like this. But he's now trapped. On one hand, he doesn't want to do the all for all because he doesn't want to make all these concessions. And on the other hand, he cannot handle the drama and trauma that this is causing for his government as a result of the nature of the exchanges underway. So the trap is for Israel, is not for the Palestinians. Palestinians have nothing to lose at this point. I mean, they have been through genocide, through famine, through starvation, through everything you can possibly imagine. And they have everything to gain from this point on. Will Israel concede to this or not? That's, I think, is the main question.
So Hamas released the Bibas family just today. It included bodies of a 2- and 5-year-old brother and sister, or I'm sorry, I don't know actually their gender, but they're babies. And Hamas is saying they were killed in Israeli strikes. And Israel is saying this is unacceptable. You return these babies. And they paraded these coffins. What do we make of this story? Because, of course, it's showing brutality, the brutality of the war. Nobody wants to see this, no matter what nationality the babies.
Absolutely. But so Israel is trying to use this for propaganda material because they are out of ideas. There's very little they can do about it. Once in a while, and that includes some members of my family, where Israel would bring all these trucks, dump all of these bodies, some of them mutilated on top of each other, and come and with these trucks at the Gaza border, and they will just dump them there, and they tell the Red Cross, go and collect the bodies. So all these families go and try to kind of see among the mutilation who is who. The way that the Palestinians have delivered this family that was killed by Israel, and we know it was killed by Israel for one simple reason. Palestinians are desperate to hold on any of these hostages alive to exchange them for as many Palestinian prisoners as possible. It makes no sense for Palestinians, for example, to go and kill and shoot babies. It just doesn't make any sense from any point of view. It's just not consistent with the narrative of the war. This is why Netanyahu has disallowed Israeli media from carrying the coverage of that funeral that was held for them, for that family, by the Palestinians themselves, because he was trying to deny Hamas that kind of the propaganda, the counter propaganda element.
Okay. So what you're saying is that this is a ceremony. This is a funeral. This is not
it was a military funeral, absolutely.
Okay, I'm sorry, because the Western media has covered it as some kind of macabre parade, a coffin parade. So, we don't get to hear a different narrative. That's why I'm asking you.
Absolutely. It was held in a graveyard. I mean, this is really important as well. And each one had the coffin, like a separate coffin, as opposed to mass graves and that sort of thing, with the full name and the exact reasons behind their death. And it was the Nukhba forces of Hamas, which are the elite forces of Hamas that actually conducted the military ceremony and the process. There's absolutely no comparison. And of course, the media is going to spin it no matter what. No matter what the Palestinians are going to do or don't do. If they put them in bags and give them to the Red Cross, they are going to be demonized. If they put them in a dignified way and they did military ceremony, they are going to be vilified. It makes no difference as far as mainstream media is concerned, but it's important for those who are interested to understand this outside of mainstream media narratives, that this is not at all what actually has taken place.
Okay, I was not able to find any of that, so thank you for that context. And now, I mean, obviously, some of the comments might be, but they were in your control. They were in harm's way. They were babies, right? And so there's empathy here. It's just horrible from every side, right? And so the Hamas must have some kind of proof for which bombing raid they were killed in, if that's true, right?
Absolutely. Just another technical point here. They were not held by Hamas. They were held by a group called the Mujahideen forces. This is not Hamas. Oh. So Hamas basically kind of tried to take charge of the situation and try to get involved in managing the situation, but none of this process was in Hamas's control from beginning to end. There are various factions and various resistance groups in Gaza, and they make independent political decisions. But again, mainstream media sees all Palestinians as Hamas, and Hamas as Hezbollah, and so forth and so on. I mean, it's the same old story. But in actuality, this was not a Hamas process. Hamas managed the political fallout of that process later on.
Well, who took them from their homes to begin with? Was it also the Mujahideen?
It was the Mujahideen forces, which is a different group that we're all involved in now. I read the statements and heard the interviews with the representatives of this group. And I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm not defending it. I'm just conveying what they have said, especially if they were speaking in Arabic. They said that the mother involved in this, she was a member, and that is proven. She's a member of the 8,200 intelligence group. This is the notorious Mossad Shin Bet operation that's happening in the Gaza envelope. They said, we did not expect that the Israeli brigades in that region to completely collapse the way it did. So we had a choice to either leave the children by themselves or to take them with the mother. Now, some people might say that this is unjustifiable or not. It's a whole different stream of thoughts. But the fact is, this is what the Mujahideen people are saying. They said, we did not want to take hostages out of children. And if you remember the first statement made by Hamas about the civilians, they said that this is a burden on us and they are guests until the war is over. This is the term that they have used. Again, your viewers can justify or explain or contextualize this, but this is really what is being told by these groups in their explanation of why civilians were in Gaza in the first place.
Right. And the Palestinians have made the argument over and over and over again that collective punishment is unacceptable and against international law. So that has to apply across the board. Now, just minutes ago, Netanyahu has demanded Hamas exile from Gaza in order to move forward with a ceasefire, but that's who he's dealing with a ceasefire. Obviously, much like Zelensky, if there's a ceasefire and the war ends, the Netanyahu government will face the consequences of their handling of this. So what do you think becomes of this negotiation now that the Palestinians are saying no Israeli forces in Gaza, get the heck out, and Netanyahu says we'll get out, but Hamas has to get out too? That seems like a stalemate once again.
Anyone who knows anything about the nature of Gaza and the history of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict in Gaza by itself, forget about the rest of Palestine and Lebanon and the entire region, you would know, or they would know, that Hamas is an integral part of Gaza society. We're not talking about the PLO forces in South Lebanon during the 1982 Israeli invasion, where they could actually isolate a certain number of people and say they are PLO fighters and commanders, and they can, in fact, be pushed out. And they did succeed with American support to push them out of Lebanon in 1982, leading to the gruesome massacres of Sabra and Shatila. Gaza is a different story. Hamas is Gaza, and Gaza is Hamas. You have a society that is so well connected, you can't even decide who, like my family has representation from all sorts of political backgrounds. My family is mostly communist and socialist, but you also have your Fatah and your Hamas and your everybody. It's not the kind of thing you would say two of the brothers stay in Gaza and the other two brothers would leave Gaza. It makes no sense. Netanyahu knows this, but he is trying to increase the ceiling of the demands to make it appear as if it's the Palestinians who are delaying the process of a final ceasefire that would allow Palestinians to receive finally some respite, some food, some electricity, some water, gas for their cars, material for reconstruction of Gaza. So he's using this as a tactic. But in actuality, there can be no scenario, imaginable scenario, in which Hamas or any other Palestinian group will leave Gaza. It's just not going to happen.
Okay. I did not understand that context. So even if Netanyahu does, I think most Westerners don't. They think it's just, round them up with a rope, get them out, and then we have peace. So thank you for explaining that. So coming up in the coming few days, there will be an Arab summit of leaders from Israel, it seems, Saudi Arabia, perhaps the UAE, and they are going to try to decide if they can take over the rehabilitation of Gaza so that the United States does not try to move forward with Trump's plan to own it nonsensically. So what do you think? Is this going to be just a bidding war? Is this something that the Palestinians want? Is help from neighboring Arab nations?
Okay, so this is very, very interesting, and it could actually be fascinating in terms of the outcome of this. I have always argued that Arab regimes are irrelevant in any of this. They were irrelevant in the war itself, they were irrelevant in the context that led to the war, and they were irrelevant in the outcome of the war, but they could become relevant. And I think Trump has created this scenario, this kind of zero-sum scenario that is going to push them to either say, we don't want to be involved in any way, and if Israel manages miraculously to push Palestinians out of Gaza, well, let them destabilize our regimes. We know that if Palestinians are pushed out of Gaza, Arab regimes will be destabilized. And we know that because of history. In 1948, Israel pushed out 80% of the population of Gaza during what we call the Nakba, or the catastrophe. And the result is Jordan was destabilized, Egypt was destabilized, the entire region, war after war after war, because of that singular event. Imagine pushing out 2.2 million people within a context of a collective trauma and a genocide. The kind of rage that's going to happen in Arab countries and the destabilization of Arab governments is going to be something unbearable by anybody. This is why suddenly the Arabs are very interested and they are holding summits. It's not that because they care so much about Palestinians, they are caring about the political outcome and the fallout of this decision on their own regimes. So if they decide...
Is it possible Trump was playing them to get them to do this so he doesn't have to? Is that an angle that?
Well, I recently spoke to Scott Ritter about this, and he said, I think this is Trump's way of trying to get a counter offer, from the Arabs. Whether that is the case or not, I don't think the counter offer is going to exceed what Palestinians would want. Palestinians do not want to see Arab forces in Gaza to finish the job that Israel has failed to finish. And the Palestinians will not accept further resistance to leave Gaza. So what can the Arabs do that is going to make both sides happy, appease the Americans, and at the same time do not end up creating a new conflict between the Arabs and the Palestinians? I have looked at the Egyptian proposal. It seems very reasonable. Reconstruction of Gaza within 3 years. Hamas not to be involved in the political process. And here is a little hint. Hamas did not want to be involved in the political process. Hamas entered the political process in the first place by total miscalculation. And when they made the decision of October 7 to do the assault on the Gaza envelope, I am pretty certain that Hamas has decided when they made that decision that we don't want to be part of the government, because government means dealing with the everyday reality, electricity, water, municipality. This is not what resistance movements do. So Hamas is trying to create a Hezbollah scenario. We are a resistance movement. We help, we operate, but the government needs to take care of its own problems. So will Hamas ends up getting this scenario and create a Hezbollah kind of situation in Gaza? Or will the Arabs offer something different? We know for a fact that Israel is out of cards. Israel has absolutely nothing that could do right now, aside from delaying the aid, that could actually change the outcomes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that. That's a fantastic context. I have one more question, because this is a story we haven't followed up on. But when the Israelis were pushed to admit that there was sexual abuse of Palestinian prisoners, they revolted for their right to continue to do this. What is the status of those investigations and Palestinian prisoners right now? Because we know the status of Israeli prisoners that are in Hamas care. Care is the wrong word. In their captivity. What is going on with that investigation and those rules? Do those remain in place? The Israelis can still rape with impunity?
Nothing has changed as far as that is concerned. Nothing has changed. We know about the status, for example, of some Palestinian doctors, because they are, very well known, like Abu Safiya and others, because of the international attention and the Red Cross's involvement. But the vast majority of Palestinians, we have no idea. In fact, in many, like thousands of the Gaza prisoners, we don't even know whether they are dead or alive. And that includes members of my family. They are missing. We don't know, are they in prison? Are they dead? Are they alive? So Israel would not even release that kind of information. So you can only imagine that the kind of abuse and torture that is taking place right now, we don't know the details of it. We just only know the degree of horror because of some of the bodies that have been released, or some of the testimonies given by some of the Palestinian prisoners who were released, talking about what they have seen in their cells.
Right. Okay. Thank you for explaining this to us. There's a lot of, I thought that I could see through the propaganda, and there's a lot that I didn't know. So I really appreciate that. You can follow Ramzy on X. It's Ramzy Baroud or ramzybaroud.net. He has many books on the Israel-Palestine conflict and offers fantastic context. And I really appreciate your time a lot.
Thank you very much.
All right, so let us know what you think of this. I know that a lot of you are very uncomfortable hearing the Palestinian side, and I ask you, what other independent media in the United States or on these platforms is giving you the Palestinian perspective? Which? Besides Tucker Carlson, which ones are you hearing this perspective from? We told you at the beginning of the show, we're Jimmy Dore. Yeah. Yes, that we're going to bring you the news the mainstream media largely ignores. Candace Owens. Okay. Yeah.
The gray zone. There are a lot of people that will tell the truth about it. I mean, I know it makes some people uncomfortable. There was one Karen in the chat just a moment ago just saying, if this continues, I'm out. I'm leaving.
What is it you can't hear that's verifiable that the Israeli government kidnaps Palestinians on a regular basis? Is that uncomfortable to hear? I don't like the actions of Hamas on October 7th. Right. I don't like any of this. We have to see it from all sides. We have to be brave enough to hear it, even if we don't like it.
We have no agenda on this show. So, like, if you want like a one-sided perspective, put on Fox News, that you'll only hear one side.
Oh, yes. They're all about raising Gaza. They don't give a crap at all. It's really hard to watch.
But we are independent, and we will not do that, and we will not simp for either side. We're not gonna bend over for Netanyahu when he comes to Washington D.C., where members of Congress hang up Israeli flags in the middle of the United States Congress, and we're also not going to stand for violence against anybody. So again, that's where we come from on this side. We're not going to stand for Hamas killing people on October 7th, but we're also going to point out the fact that Israel knew it was coming and stood down on October 7th and allowed it to happen. That is verifiable. Those are facts. So
we will not
all of that might be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I'm sorry it's uncomfortable. Let's talk about it, though. Let's have a conversation.
I'm curious at the people who were still in the chat validating that the war in Ukraine did not start in 2022, but want to pretend that the war in Israel did start on October 7th. How can you reconcile those
They forget
two things?
1948. They forget all of that, but that's okay. Again, we welcome everybody, but this is a place to have, you don't have to run and I'm not watching that again. I can't. It doesn't comport with my worldview. So if it doesn't comport with your worldview, maybe you should, question things and start to open your mind about some things. Sorry, what was someone saying about October 7th in the chat?
Also, yes, if you have a different perspective about the behavior of the IDF, please bring it to us. We will read everything. We don't absolutely want to feel any one way about any government, full stop.
Genetic Jabber says, does this mean Redacted is now on the Israeli terrorist list now too, just like we're on the Ukrainian hit list?
Dang it.
Probably. I mean, who knows? They really go after people who don't support their genocide, but that's the way it goes. Anyway, we've got more news to get to here on your Thursday. We're going to talk about Canada, and the Liberals in Canada are trying to cancel elections, it looks like. Maybe taking a page out of the playbook of Zelensky in Ukraine. Here's an idea to hold on to power through 2026. We'll just cancel Canadian elections. Is that what is being planned right now? We're going to talk about that in a second, but first,
we want to remind you about our friends at Ramp, because have you been getting your tax statements now that January has ended and you're starting to get these statements that you need to report your income to the IRS? And then are you looking through shoe boxes for your receipts, digging through your deleted emails for maybe purchases? Well, that's not the way. You need to have a finance software that can help you organize all of that muck into look at that. That's beautiful, right? You need it to be beautiful, not beautiful. Ramp will help you take charge of your expenses. Not only do you have these dashboards that will give you a sense of your spending, but also they can issue company cards, and those cards can categorize expenses much easier. So at the end of the month, you can close the books and move on, see where you were that month, and then use that information to have an even better month the next month. So make sure you are in charge of your expenses with Ramp. Check out all of their offerings. In fact, one CFO says that they cut their month-end close from 5 days to 1. They can close the books in 1 day. I love that. So no more manual logging of receipts or chasing approvals. You can switch to Ramp. And right now, for a limited time, listeners of this show can get $250 when you join Ramp by going to ramp.com/redacted. One more time, that's ramp.com/redacted. The cards are issued by Sutton Bank, which is a member of the FDIC. Terms and conditions apply. You guys get nerdy. Get the sexiest finance software you can find. Love that stuff. Ramp.com/redacted.
Well, here's the latest Liberal strategy to hold on to power in Canada. Cancel the elections. Keep Canadians from going to the polls altogether. Take a page out of Zelensky's handbook in Ukraine. Listen to Karina Gould, the Trudeau's House leader and Liberal leadership candidate, who says Liberals may not allow Canadians to vote in an election this year because of a tariff war with Trump. It's Trump's fault. Listen.
If we are in a full-blown tariff war with the U.S., that might be a reason not to go to the polls. But we are also in a minority government, and so it's actually not just up to the government at the time. There would have to be an agreement with the opposition parties if we weren't to do that. But I think whatever decision we take has to be one that is responsible for Canadians. And one of the things I can say is that, in Ontario, the Premier has decided to call an election at a time where, his energy might be better spent defending Ontario's interests. And so I think Canadians will judge us as to what we decide to do, both as the governing party or as opposition parties, depending on where we are with Donald.
Yeah, where we are with Donald Trump on the tariff. So really, if we have elections in Canada, it's really dependent on what happens with Donald Trump and these tariffs. Let's bring in David Clayton, independent journalist out of Ottawa, Canada, who writes at the Post Millennial. He's got a great YouTube channel as well, Clayton's Right on YouTube, and he's been doing some great interviews lately on all of this. David, great to see you. Welcome to the show. So canceling elections in Canada, is that seems to be the way to hold on to power?
Well, it's funny. This was first mentioned when Trudeau prorogued or suspended Parliament. A lot of folks on the Conservative side said, hey, you know, they could do this again and they could keep staying in power until October 2026, because doesn't the Constitution of Canada say that a government can stay in power for 5 years? But people said, but hey, 15 years ago, the House of Commons voted to have elections every 4 years. So that's the new tempo. But here we have Karina Gould, and there's been liberal strategists talking the same way. Mark Carney won't answer the question if he's asked about whether or not he's going to hold on to power if he becomes prime minister, or whether he wants to have an immediate election. So this tells me that all of those conservatives who said, hey, this could happen, and were labeled as conspiracy theorists, you know that word, it's once again, the conspiracy theory is being proven to be true. And Karina Gould, by the way, you mentioned this earlier in the show about that Waffen-SS, that former Waffen-SS member who was invited to the House of Commons, given a place of honor in the gallery to listen to Zelensky's speech. Well, it was Karina Gould who invited Yaroslav Hunka, the former Nazi, to come to Ottawa, to come to the House of Commons. And it was Karina Gould who said all of that should be redacted from the record. It should all be censored. Everything that happened that day should be censored from the official government record, which we call Hansard. And that's Karina Gould. So now she wants to cancel elections. She wanted to cancel the memory of her inviting a Nazi to the House of Commons as well.
Oh, we know her well. Now, tell us a little bit about what we're seeing on X, which is this anti-Americanism that you see. And in fact, even a redacted viewer, when we covered the tariffs, they thought, oh, you're anti-Canada now. So are we enemies? How did that happen?
Are we anti-Canada all of a sudden?
Yeah, you and I, do we have to hate each other?
What's going on here?
Well, it's very mysterious to me because we had a 30-day reprieve to get the border in order, which, of course, Justin Trudeau hasn't really done very well. But in the meantime, he's escalating the tough talk about counter tariffs, retaliatory tariffs. Don't buy American, buy Canadian. And of course, it's all being focused right now on these hockey games where there's booing of the national anthem. So I thought we were trying to work towards a negotiated settlement here. We were trying to get to a solution, because a trade war is not something that Canadians want or Americans want. I'll tell you who wants a trade war, though. Justin Trudeau, the Liberal Party, Mark Carney, his anointed successor. They want a trade war because they want to run in the next election against Donald Trump, not against Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, because they're going to lose that election. But they think they can win an election against Donald Trump, this U.S. boogeyman. The Liberals have been doing this for decades, putting the Americans up as this other party out there, as putting the United States up as this foreign entity that is corrupting and subsuming Canadian values. And we need to be vigilant and we need to be on guard against the United States. This is an old liberal trick, but I can tell you, I don't think it's going to work, because people know what Trudeau, Carney, and people like Karina Gould are up to. This is just face-saving measures so Canadians can forget a decade of catastrophic management of the economy, a decade of absolute disaster in this country. That's what Trudeau and the other Liberals want Canadians to forget when they focus on Donald Trump and the United States. Most Conservative Party supporters love Donald Trump because of what he's doing right now through these executive orders, how he's defeating the deep state, how he's coming out strong against DEI and against critical race theory, how he is restoring common sense. That's the same platform the Conservative Party in Canada is running on. It's a common sense platform. So I don't think this is going to work. We're not enemies. As Lincoln said before the Civil War, we are not enemies, we are friends, and we have to remember that.
Well, that's something Maxime Bernier continues to say in his platform on X. And this week, he's been really excited about peace talks between Russia and the United States and its proxy, Ukraine. So which leaders do you have in Canada that are saying that are anti-war, that are for peace, that are willing to say Zelensky's a thug, besides Maxime Bernier?
Yeah, is Polyev on that train?
No, unfortunately we don't. And I criticize Polyev on this all the time because I, like you both, I'm completely, utterly opposed to this war in Ukraine and the billions of dollars we have sent into this black hole of Kiev. And we continue to do that. We need to end this war. I agree the war was not started 3 years ago. It goes back to at least 2014. There are lots of reasons for this invasion of Russia. Ukraine cannot be a member of NATO. It's an outrageous idea. But no, Pierre Poilievre is not saying this. He's been in lockstep with Justin Trudeau all along. And there's no other political party in Canada except the People's Party of Canada that is supporting this. And my hat's off to Maxime Bernier. I am a good friend of Maxime. And if the People's Party of Canada wasn't polling at about 3 or 4% right now, I think I'd probably be on Maxime's side. But even Maxime has told me he does not expect to be the next prime minister. He knows the Conservative Party of Canada is probably going to win the next election and Pierre Poilievre will be the prime minister. But I will keep pushing Pierre Poilievre from the right, from a conservative perspective, on foreign policy as well as fiscal policy, because I worked at the House of Commons for far too many years. I know I can't trust politicians. I know one thing about politicians, they will always let me down. And if we don't push them in the right direction, and I use that word right in two distinct ways. If we don't do that, they will always drift to the left, and they'll always end up doing not what they were elected to do.
I think that's why we're all so shocked about President Trump right now. I mean, we have a first term where he wasn't able to drain the swamp. He actually added to the swamp in his first term. And here he is totally draining the swamp. And we're all in shock that he said these things he was going to do. And now he's actually doing them. And everyone's in shock. They cannot handle it right now. It's unbelievable. Something else that they can't handle, Canadians can't handle the United States winning in the hockey game, in the big hockey game last weekend, where fights broke out and they booed our national anthem. David, what is going on there? And then tonight, of course, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about tonight is the night, the championship game in Boston, United States, Canada.
Are we enemies there?
Are we enemies there? What do you think is going to happen tonight? Will the U.S. take home the crown, or will Canada be victorious?
Well, based on the last game, I think the U.S. has a good chance of taking home that crown. I know Donald Trump invited Justin Trudeau to join the governor's conference tonight as the 51st governor. And, of course, that went over very well, of course, with Justin Trudeau. But this booing of national anthems is so low class. I hope Canadians are better than this. It disgusts me. Politics has no place in a sports arena. This is a hockey game. This is ridiculous, and it embarrasses me to see Canadians booing the national anthem when after 9/11, of course, Canadians played the United States national anthem at many different occasions. I was there in Parliament Hill for a lot of those occasions, and we proudly stood along with Americans. We have proudly stood with Americans during the Second World War, during the First World War, during Korea. We had the Devil's Brigade was made up of Canadian soldiers and U.S. soldiers during the Second World War. It was a first-class Special Forces brigade made up of Canadians and Americans. We are friends. There is no place for this nonsense at hockey games. We need to get back to reality.
Right. And we here on Redacted also spoke out when we're not above it. Americans booed the Russian national anthem in many instances through Olympic Games and things like that.
I just hope
nobody should do that. Full stop.
Can I say I hope that Americans in Boston tonight at the game, we'll see what Boston does. It'd be like it's in New York. There's going to be booing going on. So hopefully when they play the Canadian national anthem tonight in Boston, there's no booing. That would be nice. Elevate the conversation, Bostonians. Elevate it. And cheer the American national anthem, and don't boo the Canadian national anthem tonight. So we will see. David, great to see you up there in Canada. Very interesting times what the Liberal government of Canada is trying to do right now. Thanks as always, and continue the great work. Thanks, David.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Clayton, and thank you, Natalie.
Yep.
Our pleasure. Thanks, David. Great to see you. And yeah, I mean, we were I'm wearing my Omaha Beach sweatshirt today. The Canadians and Americans fought side by side on those beaches all up and down Normandy, on D-Day and through the Second World War. And so like this kind of back and forth hatred right now is kind of sickening right now. But it's like it's like brother and sister, sibling rivalry, I guess, right now.
We don't need it. We don't have time for that.
Also, I have a special report that I just authored specifically on this tariff. So if you want to understand these reciprocal tariffs, this is what Trump has said this now multiple times over the past few days. He keeps and he pauses and he wants to make sure that he says reciprocal tariffs. He keeps making this point. And I put together a special report specifically on these reciprocal tariffs. I co-authored this. So take a look at your screen. If you want to grab it right now, you can go to redacted.inc/tariffs to grab that special report. Again, redacted.inc/tariffs to grab that special report, because the United States is taking its power back. And what does it mean with these reciprocal tariffs to restore America's prosperity right now? So head on over to redacted.inc/tariffs and grab that special report on what President Trump is planning to do here. It'll kind of lay out in detail. It's just a few pages long, so you can see it and have a better understanding of all of that. So again, redacted.inc/tariffs.
Well, before we go, we want to remind you that Redacted is brought to you by American Financing, because, again, if you are excited about independent journalism like we are, then you want to support the companies that support our show. American Financing is a great place to go if you find yourself in high credit card debt, in any kind of bad debt, what they call high interest debt that is not attached to something that's making money, that's just costing you. Well, American Financing can teach you to leverage the equity in your home in order to get out of that bad debt, because obviously if you have that money sitting in equity, it's not helping you if you continue to dig yourself into the red. So this is a trick that wealthy people do all the time, which is leverage their assets, turn bad debt into good debt so you can build wealth instead of dig into debt. So they may even help you save $800 a month, plus get you out of 2 mortgage payments, which would give you a lot of breathing room. So let them teach you this trick. Go to americanfinancing.net/redacted, or you can call them at 866-890-8434. Once again, head on over. Just say, okay, I'm going to learn this. See if it works for my family, if it can help relieve the stress of debt. One more time, that's americanfinancing.net/redacted. And that's going to do it for us this week. Thank you so much for being here. We will have content all throughout the week, so stay tuned to Redacted, whatever channel you watch it. We're on YouTube, we're on Rumble, we're on X, we're on all kinds of places. We're on regular Twitch. TV, yeah.
We're on Beck Television,
Twitch. Yeah, I lose track of all of the places. So join us wherever you get your Redacted, and stay tuned throughout the weekend. We'll see you live next week on Monday. Bye, everybody.